If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. In this episode, we are joined by Ron Kastner, author of A Life Yet to Live, Finding Health, Vitality, and Joy After 60. Listen in as he shares his journey to aging well.
Ron, welcome to the Aging Well podcast. You've lived a really interesting life. Let's begin by having you share to our listeners on how you came to write the book, Finding Health, Vitality, and Joy After 60.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me here as well. I appreciate it. I will do that in a second, but before we start, I just want to say to everybody who's listening that to keep in the background while I'm doing my thing about my book and my life and everything else, what do you want out of this time of life? If you're in your 50s, 60s, and 70s, what are you looking forward to? What matters to you? In other words, what is your why for being healthy? So let's just leave that for a sec and put that in the background, but that should be in the back of your mind while we're having this. I'm 73. I'll be 74 in about a month. And about 15 or 16 years ago, I completely out of the blue, I was 58 at the time. I was on a train ride to New Jersey, which all of this is in the book. And the universe grabbed me by the lapels and gave me a good shake and said, "Wake up." And that shake was all about, you are almost 60. You've got two young daughters. And all the things that you thought were important in life are not as important as staying healthy and being a dad to them and giving them the foundations of a good life. That was made more poignant to me by the fact that I lost my own father when I was 7. And that left a hole in my life for most of my life. It was a hole that was always there. And I realized the most important thing that I could be doing for the next 20 years at least was to be a dad. So I began studying everything I could get my hands on in health. I am completely self-taught in all the stuff that I write about in the book. This stuff is not that much. It's not rocket science. It's moving more and in all kinds of different ways. It's eating less and eating more natural foods. Those are the two main tenets of the whole thing. But there again in the book, I describe, what I went through. I did a detox and I, read a couple books on the gym, going to the gym and heart monitors and all this other stuff. There's a whole bunch of much more subtle aspects that I go into in the book too, which is simply that if you spend time in the health world, particularly your own health, living in your own body, you can't help but appreciate the wonder that health is and where it came from, And we were born with this system, and doctors can tinker with it and help it along, and we can help it along and we can enhance it. But it's just a wonder and something I'm in awe about every day now that I didn't have earlier in life. It's just a kind of a very big part of the whole health thing. So that's really it. I have spent my life doing, oh God, I've done everything. Everything from a carpenter to printing salesman to I had my own printing company. I became a theatrical producer and a movie producer. I've scaled all that stuff back. I mean, 2008 was the end of my printing company when, I sold it when I had to. And but the theatrical stuff I still tinker with, but I'm not involved with it that much anymore. Most of the work I do these days is writing and looking after my health. So still a pretty active life, but not as crazed in New York and London as it used to be. So anyway.
Great. And in a nutshell, what's the book about? And more specifically, what is your definition of health?
My definition, health is a system of homeostasis, let's call it, that we were given at birth. It is nature's way of keeping us, well. My definition of health is multi-leveled. It's physical health, where all the elements are working together. My goal when I started this thing was to stay as fully functional in later life as possible. Obviously, that means no serious diseases, but it also means being flexible. It means being able to do stuff. It means being able to, every year my daughters and I do a 30-mile charity walk. So far I've been able to do that. Although last year I only did half. But I just took them skiing for a week, and I was, I have one daughter who's a professional. She's a professional ski instructor, so I wasn't keeping up with her, but I was doing okay, And it really, I mean, I just don't. When I talk to people and I tell them how I feel at my age, I don't think people my age. I don't think they appreciate what it's like to wake up in the morning and really feel good. I mean, just, like I can do everything I used to do, and I think that's pretty cool.
I don't think people my age, at the age of 35, appreciate that.
Maybe. I've done this without, look, it has not been incident free. I've had a few, I wouldn't say close calls, but haven't had any serious stuff. I had a heart arrhythmia, which had to get operated on. I've had some knee and hip issues, which I had to find some. I went to some doctors and this, that, and the other thing. One said, you should get an artificial hip, but I managed to overcome it with yoga and weights and strength, so far, at least delay it. This is a health deteriorates with age. There is no doubt about it. But there are ways, mainly through exercise and movement, that you can avoid that or at least delay it. The amount of movement I do is probably a lot more than most people would think you need. I do 4 or 5 aerobic things a week, hour long, 45 minutes to an hour long sessions. I do strength training. I do yoga. I start my day every day with some a morning stretching routine. So it's pretty, it's pretty intense. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of time. So it's not as Betty Davis said, old age isn't for sissies. And if you want to have a thriving later life, this is the kind of stuff you just probably need to do. I don't think I'm alone in recommending that. The people like Peter Attia in Outlive say the same thing. I think some of the other people like out there, preventative people like Mark Hyman doesn't think you need to exercise quite that much, but Peter Attia is definitely on the exercise bandwagon. And there's a bunch of other people who are as well. So.
Yeah, we tend to promote, and I do it in all my exercise science classes, I promote that if you want to have longevity, don't smoke, exercise, maintain a healthy body composition, eat a healthy diet, and have good sleep hygiene.
Yeah.
Those 5 things are boom. That's all you need to do.
Yeah. Well, think of the physiology of exercise. The physiology of exercise is you strain your muscles, and the joints and tendons and everything else. Those muscles get inflamed. The white blood cells surround the tissue that's slightly damaged from the exercise, and then they rebuild stronger than they were before. I mean, that in itself is a miracle when you think about it. They rebuild stronger. But those same hormones and chemicals that are rebuilding your muscles are circulating around your body. And they're not just affecting your muscles, they're affecting your organs, so if you get into that rhythm of your body restoring itself, which you can provoke with exercise and slight stress, it just heals it. It keeps the body, quote, healing, So that's what I try to do. I mean, healing is also something who knows? It's like, one day at a time, and you never know what's around the corner. But healing is something that, we take for granted. Our bodies take us through life without us giving them a thought.
Yeah.
And it's only at this time of life that you go, oh, wait a minute, it's not as robust as it used to be. But there are ways to keep it that way.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm going to be doing this forever, but for as long as I can, I will be.
Yeah.
Well, not with that attitude.
Well, I think, one of the roles of exercise too is to prepare us for the next greater stress. And, from my perspective, as we're aging, by exercising and being physically active, we're basically telling the body not to decline as much as the average person expects to decline when they age. I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging.
Absolutely. 100%. There's also, there's also the notion of lifespan longevity and longevity, and they're two different things, and health span and lifespan, rather. Health span means that, the average mortality is 80 years old. Average health span is 65 years old. So most of the big diseases that get diagnosed first show up at around age 65. So the question becomes, how do you want to spend those 15 years? And one would like to think that if you really are healthy, you're going to live way beyond 80. But how do you want to spend those 50 years? Do you want to spend them, as Aubrey de Grey once showed a great cartoon, there's one woman in a wheelchair and one woman jumping up and down, and which would you rather be? I spend summers out in the North Fork of Long Island and in a little town called Southold. It's a very blue collar town and whatever. And I have to say, some of the people I see in the supermarket are just, I want to shake them by their lapels and just go, wake up. And, this doesn't have to be. A lot of walkers and a lot of people who are overweight and whatever. It's all preventable, so.
Well, going back to your first question of, what do you want? Obviously, you're enticing people to set a goal. So in the book, you discuss setting your goals for practicing and training according to 7 categories. These categories are power, fuel or nutrition, movement, motion and flexibility, balance, alignment and posture, recovery, renewal and inspiration, clarity, and metrics, diagnose, healing, and support. Can you elaborate to these for our listeners?
Sure. I've got my book here too. I'm looking at the table of contents. Fuel, let's start with fuel. Well, so let's start with power. Power is just kind of like is health and strength and all its cousins. Stamina, resilience. It's sometimes people call it guts. It is, do you really want this bad enough to make it happen? And it comes from a place that sometimes you don't even know. It is the power that keeps us alive, And I think that needs to be cultivated or at least appreciated, in all of the other things that we do. Fuel, like I said, eating less and eating. I learned most of what I learned, or at least got set off on the road. On a detox that I did, which I got the inspiration from a book called Clean by Dr. Alejandro Younger. And it's a 3-week detox. You eliminate anything that could be harmful to you. That is alcohol, sugar, caffeine, anything with gluten in it, a bunch of nightshade vegetables. He has a whole big list in there. And in addition to that, you reduce your calorie intake by having your evening meal and your morning meal be liquid, either a shake or a smoothie or a juice or a soup. And the point of this was the whole exercise was to find out what foods don't agree with you and what foods do, and B, to give your system time to begin healing itself.
And so you're kind of doing an elimination diet then?
Yes.
Sounds like.
Yes. Well, the elimination diet, he says, is the first few days, but then you get in even a more serious, sort of calorie reduction, calorie restriction thing. But you're also giving your digestive system much, much less work to do so that your immune system can begin cleaning out all the old stuff that's inside you. And I have to say, it was a revelation. It is not easy. It is, it's very hard to not have all the stuff that you're used to and whatever. In my case, I had a social drinking problem that, that was the beginnings of my stopping drinking. Well, I haven't stopped completely now, but I did stop for about 8 or 10 years. And it tells you when you finish it, you go back to the foods that you eliminated one at a time. And I'm telling you, you'll feel the effects of them like that if they're not, once you've cleaned yourself out. So that still remains the basis of what I eat. I eat less. There's another great book called The Longevity Diet by Walter Longo, who has a whole series of longevity studies, and he has lots of recommendations. And it's basically the same thing. Eating mostly vegetables, a little bit of protein, and not having all the other stuff. Processed food is completely out. Forms the basis of what I do. If I'm out socially, it is, it's catch as catch can, and it's not the end of the world if you cheat for, 1 meal or 2 meals. It's nothing's going to happen to you. If your body's healthy to begin with. But it's not. It's not rocket science. It's eating less, and it's eating natural stuff. It's eating fresh foods, not packaged foods, and that sort of thing. Movement. I said, there's tons of evidence about zone 2 training. There's tons of evidence about high intensity interval training and how good it is for you. High intensity training, for me especially, I do it once or twice a week, feels like the fountain of youth. You know, when I finish a high intensity session, I am like, and the whole thing can sometimes take 10 minutes, but it is really exhausting. I feel like $1,000,000, and it's just, it completely reboots my body. Strength training. There's a whole bunch of stuff in the book about functional training. In other words, you can take I know we're only audio here, but you can spot train with dumbbells and things like that. But you can also incorporate full body movement into that, like lift up a weight all the way from the floor, all the way up over your head, and that will get your body to move the way it was meant to move in nature. Evolution plays a big part in all of my work, in that during the time that our human bodies were becoming human, and we were walking around on the plains of Africa, we did certain kinds of movements and we ate certain kind of foods, and that's basically what our body's like. And we've gotten away from that in the past few hundred years. So what was the next one? Okay, movement, food.
So movement, motion, and flexibility, and the next one was balance, alignment.
Balance, alignment, and posture are very subtle things that have a huge effect on our health. I learned them through the practice of yoga. They are balance, is fundamental for later life stuff. Mainly because if you fall and you injure yourself, the knock-on effects are usually pretty disastrous. You're out of commission for a while. Other people have to come take care of you. Sometimes, the lack of movement while you're healing has a knock-on effect on other things. Posture. I just wrote an article on this for the website, by the way. I do have a website that goes along with the book called at ronkastner.com. I'm going to plug myself for a second. The thing about posture is that if you're slouching in the way that older people tend to do, you can't breathe properly. You can't, you're cramping your lungs, you're cramping your organs, you're putting enormous strain on your back and your neck, which has to compensate for the slouch. So standing up straight, which is fundamental to the yoga practice, and aligning things in a way that one thing sits on top of the other, is vital to this, to this practice.
I coined in my pathophysiology and exercise textbook, to make it official, Carmine's Law, which comes from a friend of mine, Carmine Arpaia, who you might be somewhat familiar with. Peconic Landing. It's a continuous care retirement community on Long Island. It's pretty, I forget.
I know exactly where it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And he was a fitness director there for years.
It's a half a mile from where I spend my summer.
Okay. Yeah. So Carmine and his staff coined Carmine's Law, which is strength plus posture equals balance. And that the importance of balancing those two in order to train for balance. Because a lot of people just train balance. And unless you correct the postural and the strength imbalances, you're never going to really achieve true balance.
Absolutely. Do me a favor, when we're done, put me in touch with him, because I'll look him up this summer.
Okay.
If he's still there. Yeah.
He's retired. He just retired last year. I think when I had him on the podcast, he was retiring shortly after that. But I think he's still on Long Island. So
Cool. Recovery. Recovery is the next one. Unfortunately, it takes longer. You get older. When I started this thing, I was listening to guys. I was like 60 years old. I was still like rocking, at 60, I have to say. And I'm pretty rocking now, but not like that, And I was listening to guys like Ben Greenfield. I don't know if you know who he is. He's in Spokane, Washington, and he's like this master trainer. At the time, he was in his early 30s. And he's talking about longevity and all kinds of other stuff. And, he's talking about these giant workouts that he does and this, that, and the other thing. And then he goes, and next day I did this workout. Well, unfortunately, at my age, if I do a big workout, and a big workout is like an hour and a half, 2 hours with, aerobics, and then a bunch of other stuff, weight stuff, this, that, and the other thing. I'm pretty knackered for the rest of the next day, So the next day, sometimes I have like complete full-on recovery days where I do very little, but the next day will always be like a much more gentle walk, maybe a few miles, 2, 3, 4 miles at various speeds. And, but it's just meant to get circulation going. And it's not, but if I did 2 of those workouts back to back, that would overwhelm me, So, so recovery unfortunately takes longer, but you got to give it time. You got to give it time. The most important thing is that when I get back to when I do recover, that I have the same strength and stamina that I had last time, to get, to do the big workout. So it's something we have to pay attention to. It's where the body renews itself. It is in the it is the active part of the healing process as opposed to the exercise. And it needs to be paid attention to. I don't believe in hacks, I don't believe in this or that supplement that can enable you to recover faster and this, that, and the other thing. I think nature does a pretty good job with, food and water and rest. But there's a few things that, I do to promote. The circulation is always a good thing. Sleep is, off the charts wonderful for recovery. Just gentle yoga. Things like the classic yoga poses are that for recovery are supported inversions. There's a supported inversion I do on a chair that is special yoga chair, that where I'm doing a shoulder stand, but it's supported by the wall in the chair. I'd have to show it to you. Headstands are very good, but I have some kink in my neck that makes them hard for me. But even just sitting on the floor, with my back on the floor and my legs up the wall, is a very good way to restore and recover. These are all classical yoga poses that are used for relaxation and restoration. The next thing is clarity, grace, wisdom, serenity. And now this is a big one because this kind of addresses. I have this sense of clarity when things are working right inside me. And I'm sure it's related to mental clarity. I'm sure it's related to, dementia or lack thereof. I'm sure it's related to intuition. But there's a kind of, remember the book, The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck? He talks about a quality in life called grace, and it's not exactly religious because he was a psychotherapist back then. I think he's now become a practicing Catholic again, but at the time he was not. And but he was a psychotherapist, and he said there's this bigger than us force that he associated. He said, and when it's with us, we have grace, and I definitely believe in that. I feel it, and when things are working right, it's just there. And I think it goes hand in hand with the system of health and with where health comes from. 90% of us is under the surface. It's in our subconscious. That's where dreams are. That's where health is. That's where all the instructions are. that go unnoticed by us to keep us healthy, to clean our bodies up, to do this, to do that. Only 10% of it is above the surface in our conscious minds in this world that we're living in right now. But most of it goes on under the surface. And I think being in touch with that system, for me, has yielded great benefits. I know it. I don't know if it's yielded great benefits in my health, but it certainly has yielded great benefits in my emotional life. So, and I put psychotherapy in that basket as well. I for many years I was the president of the board of the Karen Horney Clinic. Karen Horney was a psychiatrist who was a pupil of Freud way back when in Berlin. And she started an institute at a clinic in New York City. And I've been in therapy on and off for a lot of my life. And I know many people in that industry, in that world. And there's something that happens at this time of life that you really want to go back and fix stuff. You really want to go back. You want to, you still have enough time to do things that you think you want to do. And B, you want to fix some things that, whether they be relationships or things inside you, that I'll just say I want to fix some things that didn't quite go right, or that were repressed or whatever. So I think that is a big, when I say clarity, that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. It's not clarity like exactness, it's clarity in that way. And then the last part, the metrics, there again, if you're healthy, you don't need too many metrics. I go to I have a yearly physical. I do a lot of blood tests, not a lot of blood tests, but I do one big blood test once a year. When something goes wrong, I see a doctor first, a medical doctor. Sometimes I see a functional doctor to see if there's something I can do to prevent it. I check in with myself to see, what did I do? What's wrong? What could this be, etc. So that is really something there. And there again, let's get back to the beginning of the conversation. I am not an advice giver. I'm not saying you have to follow the path that I've followed. What I'm saying is that the journey that I've been on is mine. The book is primarily a memoir. The journey that I've been on is mine, and it's a worthwhile journey to go on to pursue a more complete and fulfilling later time of life. And health is its foundation. So everybody has to find, getting back to the metrics, everybody has to find their own way to do this. So I'll shut up now for a minute.
But kind of along the lines and kind of back to the kind of the movement, the balance, the type of training that you do in there. On the podcast, we tend to often talk about the role of weight training. And in the book, I want to phrase this carefully because I don't think that's in the intent of it, but it seems to give you a little bit less favorable opinion about weight training. And I just wonder if you could elaborate on that a little bit more. Is this something that's from more personal experience or personal preference? Or do you feel like it's something based on science? And I think I recall at some point in the book, you talk about Aubrey de Grey and that skinny matters. And so I'm just kind of curious kind of where you're coming from in that perspective.
That guy is so skinny, you would not believe. I've met him in person. He is just so skinny, so you would not believe it. But no, he said this thing in a TED talk, and it took me by surprise. The guy had a tiny bit of I have a couple doctor friends who I talk to about this, and they would never say this to their patients. But they say to me, you don't see a lot of overweight people in their 80s. Mm-hmm. Just doesn't happen. Now, some of that is muscle loss and some of that is whatever. But the ones that make it that far, and this is not about fat shaming and, other things, and it's not about any of that stuff. this is about metabolic health. And metabolic health tends to be better with less fat on you, period. You know, I mean, I am not skinny by any means. I am thin, but I'm mostly muscle. Uh, I have I think my body fat is probably 12 or 13%, something like that. Last time I did a scan or something like that. And, on the thing that I do it in the gym, all the things come up green, I don't know what they would be if I was heavier. Mm-hmm. All I know is that for me personally, feeling empty without my stomach being full and all that other stuff and feeling light just makes life easier and more comfortable, So there again, to each his own, my sense is that people will find once they explore their own health that lighter is better. Mm-hmm. So strength training, the classic strength training that you see in the gym with the machines and the so-called orthostatic stuff, where everything is kind of like, if you do it by the machine, by what the machines are saying and what a lot of trainers are saying, really not all that good for you. It might build muscle, but it unbalances your muscles, your pushing and pulling muscles. It doesn't use your body in a way that it was. Look, the classic movements that our bodies are used to are walking, running, throwing, probably using a log or something in prehistoric times to hit something like a baseball, like a baseball bat, pulling roots and trees and everything else, all kinds of fighting, climbing. So those are the kinds of full body you would never see, for instance, a chimp pulling himself up on a branch with one arm, yeah. Or even two arms. He'd use his feet, he'd use his body, your bodies are meant to work in, giant coordinated sheaths. They're called fascia, that are wrapped around muscles that do these big coordinated movements. Your bodies are meant to move, in a wholesome way. Now, I met a trainer when I first started doing this, and I explained what I was looking for. And thank God he was a little bit older and he was skilled in this stuff. His name is Graham Fairley. He's a great guy. We designed a whole bunch of things. He said, what kinds of things do you want to be doing in real life? I said, when I get on a plane with my daughters, I want to be able to pick up a heavy piece of luggage and put it into the overhead compartment. So we did that. We did that with a 24 kilo kettlebell, and we did it from the side and we did it from the front and we did it and it was like from the ground all the way up over my head. And we designed a whole bunch of stuff that still serve me today. I have to say they're great. They're great. They're a great series of exercises.
It seems like you're kind of more into calisthenics or animal style, they'll call it. It's where the person's using more of their natural movements and their own body weight to go through the movements instead of the classic just machines and stuff like that. But it also seems like you're kind of an advocate for free weights as well.
I think free weights are the way to go, and do them in a way that mimics natural movements. The machines, I'm not. I still do them once in a while, but I do things like, I do squats and lunges, and the only machines I do use are the leg presses, But I do them in coordination with a series of exercises showed to me by a physio. With rubber bands with handles, those I think Perform Better or somebody makes them. I forgot the name of the company. And what they do is when you're in a squat, if you're in a squat with these things and you start moving your arms, you're forced to balance in the squat or the lunge as opposed to just statically sit there. In other words, balance becomes part of the exercise, and every joint and part of your body is supported by every joint, especially by a whole range of little muscles that keep everything in place and keep it all functioning well, muscles and tendons. And you don't get the weights, the machines tend to exercise the big muscle groups. You don't get the subtle kind of balancing things that you get from the other ones, from these other kinds of exercises.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of machines anymore either. I've really shifted to the more free weights, and I do take a heavier and heavier lifting approach. I mean, as I get older, I want to keep getting stronger. I enjoy kind of a coach strength and conditioning with the wrestling team locally, and
good for you. Wrestling is great.
I keep them humble. They'll start getting cocky about something, and I'll pick up a weight that, if they fail to squat or something, I just kind of Zercher squat it back up on the rack, and they're looking at me like, really? How old are you? And
I have a 60-year-old friend who just got his black belt in karate, and he regularly beats people half his age. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, that's a great thing.
Yeah.
Makes you feel good too.
Yeah, it does.
When I do a back bend or a wheel in the gym, even the trainers are looking at me like a yoga wheel where you're completely upside down and up in a thing. The trainers are going, "Ooh, that's good. That I can't do that." So that makes me feel good. Yeah, I mean, there again, everybody's body is different. Everybody's, I learn, there's a part of a chapter in the book. I had about a year and a half ago, I was bitten by a tick, and I got Lyme disease and babesiosis together. And it landed me in the hospital for a day and whatever. It was just horrible. And it took me a good 2 months on antibiotics to recover, during which time I couldn't do any movement or anything. I was just too weak. And if you want a good experiment to see if your routines that you've developed for your health are working, stop them for a couple of months and see what happens to you. Mm-hmm. And I was, I had lost most of my muscle mass. I had lost all my aerobic stuff. I had to start from scratch. And it was a lesson learned, it was a big lesson. So, I wouldn't want to face life without the strength I have now, is what I'm saying. It just makes all the difference in the world.
We often discuss aging from the perspective of what Dr. Armstrong calls well-centered fitness, which includes spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotional, and social dimension of wellness. How do these dimensions or components of well-centered fitness play into your vision of aging well?
Well, I think I probably answered that at length in the other ones. It needs to be all around. It needs to be your life. It's not just the gym. It's not just the eating. It's not just it is everything. In my particular case, one of the things I am working on more these days is being more social. I was an only child, and I spent a lot of time on my own. I enjoy being on my own. I like just puttering and pondering and all that other stuff. But I realize, especially as I get older, that is not always. I have a lot of good friends, but I just want to spend more time with people. So that's one aspect that I'm working on now. And the other thing is my daughters are now they're young women. So I don't have to be dad 24 hours a day anymore. So that's a good thing. It is a full thing. Health in all of the dimensions that you mentioned and all of the dimensions I go in my book are one big thing. And I quite frankly, I don't think there is a lot of, if you're flexible, let's say, your body's flexible. My body is fairly flexible, but how flexible are my attitudes? You know, how amenable am I to other people? Another word for flexible is not rigid. You know, how are my attitudes? And that all plays into the health that I practice. It doesn't occupy one small world of just physical health. So.
A question I often get asked and like to ask of others is, if you could go back in time and change one thing, what would that be?
Unfortunately, I would say my dad wouldn't have died, and he would have been there, while I was growing up. I mean, if I could change one thing that I personally did, I don't know. Joseph Campbell, who's I'm a big fan of, the guy who writes all the books on myth and religion, whatever, said, you get to a point in life where you look back on it and it's as if somebody was writing the story, Well, and there's an arc to your life that you weren't even aware of, that writer is inside all of us. And it's all the little things, all the little decisions that we make, etc. And in most ways, it is what it is, and it's been fine, and it's been fine. So I'm looking forward every day to yet another day of it, in good health. So.
And my response to that question has always been, I wouldn't change a thing, because I wouldn't be who I am in this moment. Yes. If anything got changed in the past. And you think about it, as terrible as it was to have lost your dad at the age of, what'd you say, 7?
Yeah.
If you had not lost him, how would your trajectory of life been different than, what you had accomplished, how you interact with your daughters and all that? It's really a deep philosophical question I like to ask people, because, when you really kind of get down to it, it's like, yeah, and you kind of answer that. You said you really wouldn't change anything.
Well, what you're saying also is that you like yourself as you are. Yeah. And this, by the way, is probably a bigger thing than most people realize in their later life, because they start losing health and they start losing looks and there's a creeping kind of, ooh, I don't like this, or I don't like myself for this happening to me.
Yeah.
And liking yourself is a critical fact. I mean, I ask myself, do I like myself enough to practice all the things that I do? And most of the time the answer is yes, but some of the times, it's like when I'm not liking myself, I don't want to do anything either. I don't want to eat right. I want comfort food. I don't want to go to the gym. What do I have to do that for? All that stuff. So anyway.
So here's a question that we ask all of our guests, and I know you've already covered it, but perhaps there's something that you'd like to add. And the question is, what are you doing personally to age well?
All right. All of the above. I would, let me think for a sec. There's a quality that I call self-realization. And I think just like hunger or the need for love or the need for support or the need for health, it is part of the human psyche, and we're born with it. And it never goes away. And this time of life is precious in that We have extra time on our hands, and we have the wisdom of having lived this long, and we can really work on that process, on who are we, what do we like, what matters to us, and we can live that, without the daily pressures of, oh God, I got to go out and I got to go to work, and work is, work. I need to do this. Well, hopefully people have comfortable enough retirement situations. But it is a precious time of life, and it in all its facilities, and health is the foundation of the whole thing. If you don't have health, none of that's going to happen. So anyway.
Well, I know that you gave a plug to your website earlier, but I just
Okay.
want to say thank you so much for your time today. And I'm sure there's a lot of our listeners that are going to be interested in reading your book. So what was that webpage again? And is there another way for them to contact you? Social media or something to that effect?
If you there is a Facebook page linked to the website. It's Ron Kastner, RONKASTNER. RonKastner.com is the website. The book is A Life Yet to Live. They're all kind of linked, if you the book has some stuff in there, but RonKastner.com is the, you can buy the book there. You can look at all the posts. I do a weekly newsletter. You can sign up for the weekly newsletter. I do a couple of posts a week on different subjects that interest me. That's ronkastner.com. So,
and that's all one word, right? There's no space between the names, right?
There's no space between them, and everything is there. There's a story of my, how this happened. There's book links. There's this links. There's that links. So, and hopefully there'll be, more, a lot more stuff coming in the future. So,
right. And we'll provide the link in the episode notes, so anybody listening can actually just be able to click right on it.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Ron Kastner, thank you for joining us on the Aging Well podcast. We certainly enjoyed the conversation and hope you will keep aging well.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.